school committee, Ellen, for not trusting the city when it comes to maintenance. The facilities was the big one last night, the big question. The team up with the city and the schools. Let's team up so we could keep our 27, 28, or 29 schools. I think we got at least 29.
So who brought that up? Was it the mayor that brought it up?
It was the last city council meeting, obviously. The city council came up with this idea. This is what, again, this is an opinion show, and this is going to be my opinions, okay? So the city just brought this up, and what I watched last night, I was disappointed in the school committee because this is a time that they finally have a city council that wants to repair and fix our buildings, and that's because of Eric Getchia.
And that's because it's an election year.
No, yeah, but listen.
There's been other election years
On
and they
the
haven't done
city
anything.
council side, Eric Getchia was the one that really done more for maintenance than anybody I've ever seen. But then the mayor last night, obviously, the mayor has to wear two hats. He was incredible to me, and he couldn't even get one vote last night because they get intimidated. Paul George's intimidate school committee, and this is an election year, and Mike Sheehan and the custodians, don't vote for this thing, don't vote for this thing, and
So
Paul
what was the
George's
thing they were going to vote for?
vote to get together with the city and come up with a plan. The mayor said, listen, this is nothing in stone. We just want to get together to talk about forming a facilities team with each other.
So why are the maintenance
So-
guys against it? The custodians? They're supposed to clean
they're
the
all-
schools. They're not building the schools.
Yeah, I don't know about Chelmsford's budget, but in
Excuse
Lowell,
me.
Paul George's has always done a very good job as far as battling for union and teachers. You can't deny the man that.
Oh, yeah.
One of the best, I think, in the business. But like last night, what did he say? Didn't we already loan you $2 million to buy the John Dock School? Well, that's true.
What does
That's
that have
true.
to do with facilities?
Well, it's just part of him intimidating the school committee, to make sure you don't even budge this. We don't want to work with the city. We don't trust the city. And I can see that.
Oh, yeah, because
But not now. Times are changing. This is a different world. If you think you're going to put it all on the taxpayers' back, you're out of your mind. Because that's the biggest issue is property taxes. I'm telling you, everybody I talk to, I don't want my taxes going up 5%.
The council's gonna do it.
Well, yeah, they might have to. But what I would say to them, what I would have said to Paul George's if I was there, hey, Paul, the schools did donate that $2 million to buy that school. Maybe the best move I've ever seen in my life. That's going to bring back probably millions of dollars to our system, bringing special ed kids back to the city instead of them shipping them out to other places, like Chelmsford, for instance. The Lighthouse School, that's the name of it.
yes, out-of-district placement.
I remember when I was on the school committee, we'd send two children sometimes to that school, $350,000 apiece. $700,000 for two children, just that one school. But picture what we send around. Nobody talks about special ed. Why? Why don't I hear anything about special ed?
I don't know, we have talked about it in Chelmsford, so that's another whole
Oh,
ball of
yeah,
wax
it's
as far as
bad, but
I'm concerned.
when-
That's a little bit different than having the buildings owned by the city
Yeah.
and to be maintained by the city and asking whoever is the custodians or if there's maintenance workers, we all want to work together. We want to ensure that the buildings are not only clean, but they're, up to par and we don't have to do any major renovations to anything because of lack of knowing what's going on, like a roof,
Yeah.
which is you're familiar with.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that if, quote-unquote, there was a leak, we fix it, because if you don't fix it, now you got to fix all the infrastructure that the water has rotted. So,
Yeah.
so facilities is something I'm very much familiar with, and I remember having Danny Rock on this program at one point. That's before you were on the program, and basically asking him, when he was first running, what are you going to do about a long-range plan for facilities for your school system and the other buildings in your town? What are you doing on the city council relative to that? I mean,
Well-
Eric and I had pretty much a lot of things in common in wanting to make sure that when you take care of your buildings, which we do in Chelmsford, is that it's a last resort to ask the taxpayers to go into some major renovation project.
Yeah.
Our fire stations are a good example of that, in that you have, Engine 5, which is down by me in South Chelmsford. It's on a small, stamp of a piece of property. And so what do you do with it? And, you're trying to be very creative with whatever the finances are, but by the time you wait decade after decade to do something, nothing's
Well,
going down.
that's my point. In Lowell, though, Evelyn,
Excuse me.
Lowell has probably been 70 years before we've done any maintenance. But this city council, that's why I say the school committee to me, was intimidated by unions. Again, when we need to do something about the way we maintain our buildings. There's no doubt about it. It has to happen. And it has, so far in my eyes. I've been fighting some of this stuff for over a quarter of a century. Nobody has done more for the schools than this city council. Talking about Mayor Danny Rourke by hiring the superintendent of schools. You should have seen him last night, the superintendent. He bends over backwards to help out any member. And I bet you none of them went up to him and asked him, hey, Mr. Superintendent, how do you feel about this facilities thing, getting with the city? That's what I would have done. I want to know how he feels, because I think he's been incredible, and that goes to Danny Rourke, because why? He brought the motion to bring him in and show the whole system, you got a career ladder. That ignited this system as far as I'm concerned. And I hear people like, let's say a principal, because I want to say a little bit about principals if you get me the time. A principal now in Lowell, I don't know if Chelmsford's the same way, but they're in charge of their own money with a school site council. Something Jackie Doherty fought harder than anybody for this system to work.
Yeah,
And
but that's
last
part of the
night-
Ed Reform Act of
All
93.
right, but Jackie Doherty, to me, led the way in this one. And last night, a lot of the things that the principals and the school site councils wanted, they took away from them and put it in a suspense account to get some money there until they see if they're going to get the $4 million off the city. Now,
I find how they do their budgets a little different than the way that we do ours in Chelmsford. Not to change I'm not
Yeah,
trying to
that's
change the
okay.
subject here. We'll still talk about education, but when we're doing the budgets currently, okay, because we just had town meeting in Chelmsford, there is less money. And part of it always catches up with you at some point, that if you don't have increasing revenue, because your budgets are not going down, simply because you've got raises, you've got electricity, you have gas, you have different things, and everything, the utilities are going up, and delivery charges and stuff. But there's a lot of other factors in which all of the,
And government's getting bigger.
well, we're not getting any bigger in Chelmsford as far as government. Government has been bigger, they're trying to make it
Evelyn,
smaller.
ask the manager, how many people did we have 10 years ago? How many people do we have now, total?
Well, we can
Numbers
ask
going
him
up.
that question, because he's coming in next
Numbers
week.
gone up.
So we can ask him all kinds of questions.
and they did cut a lot of that in Lowell, John, administration.
and
This
we-
time, and last year they cut a little bit, this year they're cutting a little
You
bit.
just ask Liam.
Yeah.
Liam, how many people we have working here 10 years ago? Oh, I don't know. Let me get back to you on that.
Well,
Government is bigger.
all I know is you need to fix things, right? And we finally have a city council that's looking at our schools and worrying about mice that are running around our children's feet and everything. They are doing the job. First time I've seen it in my lifetime. And the mayor, last night, I couldn't ask for a better time. I would have been with him last night. And
No,
that
when
might,
he had
that might
that-
make the unions mad at me, and I'm pro-union.
So when they proposed whatever it was that they were going to do, did he actually have a plan of who was going to be on a committee?
No.
Did he have any kind of a timeline? He just wanted to throw it out there as an idea to see if it caught on?
No, he was sent over there by the city to see if we can get the schools to sit down and let's talk, negotiate, learn about maintenance of effort. That's something else at the end of the meeting, which Jackie Doherty brought up. She brought that up
She gonna run?
for years. I don't know if she's running, but she brought up an issue that Dr. Kafawi got thrown out of the city for. They'll say it was budget problems, okay? It was maintenance of effort. He brought that issue up. It's still out there. It's like deja vu watching this meeting for me last night. Maintenance of effort. Oh, I want a private audit. I want this, I want that. The mayor comes back, he says, we've audited, this has been audited, that's been audited. All I want to do is sit down with the schools and the city, and let's talk about an idea for our facilities management. That's all it was. No commitment to anything.
Right, but
Couldn't
that-
get a vote.
That's,
Mayor couldn't get a vote.
that's unfortunate, because in Chelmsford, when we first started everything, that was in 1998.
Yes.
And then when they hired a separate organization to be able to go through, which is what they did as a job, and they go through and they evaluate everything, including the sizes of all the classrooms and how many students you have, and, and that's when we found out that when they built the high school, that they undersized the classrooms. That's why at one point they had to have double sessions. So, because there wasn't enough space for the number of students for the building. It's very difficult to do something like that now because of union, I mean, it's just the way it is in how we do business. But you want to evaluate everything. But there had been a citizens committee, we'll put that in quotes. There were different ones, and I ended up on the facilities one, and that was in 1996. I got elected in 98. And what we did, I happened to be on a school council at the time, but what we did was we went from one building to the next, and we talked to each of the principals. The committee would talk to the principals and say, what is it that you need to have done in your building? What do you see that needs to have done? Could be a ceiling, could be the electrical, it could be the heating, it could be a floor, it could be doors that need to be replaced, the windows are rattling. I mean, whatever it might be. And so we had lists to work from. And then at one point I said, we got to have a report here. I wasn't in charge of anything at the time, and so we generated a report, and that report pretty much was the foundation that they looked at as we went through all of the other different committees after the fact. And that just evaluated the buildings, and that's what can happen in Lowell if they would work, if the school committee would work with the city by basically saying, let's create a committee, Paul Georges can be on it, and we go from one school to the next, the principals, you meet with the individual principals and/or teachers, or however you want to organize it, and what's going on in this building? How is your heating system? Do you have any leaks? How are the bathrooms? What's the plumbing? I mean, we went through some very mundane things. And is the paint peeling? It's an interesting thing, just like what you do in your own home. And if anybody does any maintenance in their own home, then they would know this, including the outside of the building. So we did that with ours. You have a lot more buildings.
Yeah, we have.
And
We
that
just have-
generated a report. It generated, some of it was a wish list, and some of it should be mandated, and it isn't that, unless the custodians in their contract are out there, doing the painting and doing all kinds of things with regard to each of the facilities, then you either hire somebody or you generate a need for additional assistance. And then the city would then generate having somebody come in and a project manager, and they would evaluate. And you could do a project, there's nothing but just maintenance projects to catch up.
Our system, I think, calls for something a little different, obviously. We got under 100 custodians. More than half of them don't live in Lowell. That's not my problem. I think we should be hiring almost all custodians from the city of Lowell. That's just the way I am.
Well, you wanna
And
hire
what I-
local.
Well, no, what they changed a few years back is letting the principals be in charge of their money, right?
Yeah.
Going back to that issue. And you have a school site council, that's a group of people around that's in that school, and you come up with the things you need, okay? So the principal has power in his school. To me, you need that. You need to be able to tell people, hey, I need you to do this. Now, custodians, okay? Not all principals are happy with their custodians, but if we, as a school committee, said, okay, the Rogers School across the street, we know that's got a ton of square footage. Let's put 6 custodians in that school. Because that's probably what that school needs. The Moody School might only need 2. And why do they need 2? Because they don't have an elevator to bring stuff way up and store it up in the attic, things like that. But the principal has no power at all over a custodian. So if he has one that's, let's say, a little lazy, because where I worked in the prison, 40% of the people were lazy and complaining about union issues, and 60% of the people did the job. So the principal needs that power at least. At least. If he has a bad custodian, not fire them, but send them back into the pool of custodians, because we need somebody that can do the job. And I think the principals need that much power. I always worked in a prison, so that's the way I think. You need a superintendent to run your prison.
Yeah,
And it's
well,
got to be a good one.
The principals just don't, use the term run, and organize and direct and supervise and whatever it is, the people. But they are responsible for everything else that's within the building that they've been given. And the Ed Reform Act of '93, and if somebody's out there, please correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding of it was that it created school councils so that the principal was in charge of having a committee of individuals that would be overlooking the programs, the maintenance, we'll put that in quotes because everybody has a different definition of that, and whatever would be going on within the school, so that you are governed by more than just your school committee or your city council or the mayor or whatever. So you have different layers so that, and when you have those different layers, then you have different levels of oversight so that it's hard to miss something because you have enough individuals looking at the situation, and you have people on the school council that have a vested interest in the school system and that particular building, because you have parents on that committee. I don't know if you can generate that kind of interest in Lowell, but that's what we did in Chelmsford.
Yeah.
So I find,
I'll get
that's
off
kind of
this
interesting.
issue. I'll get off this issue, right? But I have a granddaughter, same thing as having a child as far as I'm concerned. She's in the 3rd grade at the Riley School. School's deplorable. It's terrible. It's something out of the 1940s. Really, the heat's bad, the plumbing and the electrical's bad, and no AC and all. The gym floor's gone. They had no water. I mean, no heat. In November, no heat.
Okay,
Boilers were down.
But that's not the principal's
No,
fault.
no, it's not. But the city, Eric Getchia, hold on, please, so I don't forget. Eric Getchia, one person though, got all that stuff fixed for me. Heat, water, all that good stuff. Gym floors coming in
All
this
you
spring.
need is somebody that knows what's going on.
That's right, and he
Take
knows
charge.
this issue better than anybody.
Okay, John wants to chime in.
Yes, sir.
Where are the unions? Why are the unions not coughing about this deal? Because the union members can, like the fire trucks, the wheels were falling off the fire trucks, and I asked firefighters, and they just get red-faced. Where was your union? Why is your union, teachers, why is your union letting you work in such an uncomfortable building? If it was public housing and it's 67 degrees, they'll crucify the building manager because it's got to be 68. And if your classroom's cold, tell your union boss, who you're paying plenty of dough to get it fixed. And the, the union has a lot more push than any school committee member. The union falls down in their duty.
You're right about that, and I know, if I was on the city council, I'm running for the school committee, but if I was on the city council right now, I would be talking to my colleagues saying, you know what, let's pay that union back that $2 million. They're talking about the Jim Dock School in Drake Street in Lowell that we bought for special ed kids, all right, that's gonna save millions. Let's give them back that $2 million, tell them to get the pink slips ready, because that might be coming, the way they were handled, the way the school committee handled it last night. Danny's got to go back to the city council now and say, I couldn't get one vote on this. So what's the city council going to think? I would say, they're happy on the way our schools are being maintained. That's how I feel. I'm just saying myself, they're happy.
Yeah, they don't.
They like it.
Well, the other piece is it's like having your head in the sand. If you don't see what the problems are, then you're not going to do anything about them. And that's, to me, is what has been happening. And remember, on this program, when we had George Anthes, and that you'd have more, it was less Chelmsford, more Lowell, and you have different people that would come on, and I would say, so what's the facilities plan? How are you going to address all of the different buildings? Because if you don't have a secure environment and a safe environment for not only just your students, but for any of the staff that you have, then how are you teaching? It's not at 100%. Now, there are other issues with regard to education. We're not going to go off on those tangents right now. But you want to make sure that the physical climate, the physical environment within the classroom areas is something that you're not dealing with. You don't have to have the fans on. You don't have to turn the you don't have to bring in your own air conditioner. You don't have to have an electric heater and all of the other stuff that happens. And we had those issues in our schools too, and we've tried to address them. But you've got old buildings, and the old buildings were not designed for some of the newer items that's out there. And then they want to have a move to take all of your buildings and, go towards green. We'll put that in quotes. Well, the infrastructure of the buildings won't handle any kind of green technology. The electrical structure just can't support that. Plus, you have to outfit everything else. Good morning. Of course, taxes are going up. There's only one way to get money to solve problems they've created. That's correct from the taxpayer, a tax base, because there's a lot of other stuff that may be drying up. Now, it's still education we're going to be talking about, but Chelmsford has an Arts and Technology Education Fund. It was established in 1996, and I think we're the only town in the Massachusetts that if they have an education fund, that there's a bylaw that governs it. And we talked about how we're going to change it or what we're going to do with regard to that particular organization. So next year will be the 30th year. We started because there wasn't a lot of money in the system. We wanted an endowment fund. We wanted something that teachers, if they wanted to enhance their curriculum, like an enrichment program in some capacity, they would have a place where they could get some small money to be able to do that, or if they had a piece of technology that the school system didn't have in their budget, and they wanted to try it out, they could come to us and they could present an application and an argument to see if they could get some money in which to purchase that or to fund a program or an event that supported their curriculum. However, over the years, the finances in Chelmsford have changed. They did change in Lowell, too, so that there was a lot more available cash. And so as a result of that, and also a better management of the finances in Chelmsford, there was a lot of programs, there's a lot of, I would say, resources for teachers to be able to get the items that some of them used to come to us to finance. And so we were looking at trying to do something a little bit different. We had a meeting last night. We make awards every year. We had one this year. It isn't that we had one application, but different criteria. And over the years, I've asked different people in Lowell about establishing an education fund also to be able to support stuff. If you don't have good PTOs, it's another way to get money, and even if you have good ones. So we did that, and that's something that as you take a look at, the people and wanting to figure out how can we get more money into the hands of teachers versus anything else. So naturally then you would take a look at if you can get money from a different resource into the hands of the teachers. Now you need to make sure that their physical environment is good too, which ATF doesn't have anything to do with. But because I sat on the school committee and building and construction was always my thing, I wanted to make sure that whatever was in the different buildings, that not only was it aesthetically appealing, but that functionally it was sufficient in order to make sure that the teachers aren't trying to figure out how do I get the heat to come on and how do I turn the faucet, do I get water out of a faucet in a lab situation. So I think that there's a lot of other opportunities.
If you live in Lowell, let's say, right, Lowell High School, we hear a lot about that. 670,000 yesterday or the day before they gave out in scholarship money.
That's a different situation.
No, it is, but I just wanted to bring that up because I get that school. See that school behind us in the window? Dennis Murphy, and I'm so sorry I'm forgetting his wife's name. I'm not going to guess at it, but Dennis Murphy was his name and his wife. They left at least, I never could find out the figure. I asked people, at least 250,000, but for some reason I think they left the school system 500,000. I hope someone corrects that. But a lot of money. 20 scholarships just off that person. I read the list of scholarships. people's mother or father might die and people donate a scholarship. 670,000.
Well, the night
It's a
before.
lot of money.
The night before last in Chelmsford, they had the Chelmsford Alumni Association Awards, from my understanding, because I was back and forth with some people in Chelmsford Telemedia for this particular program being aired in Chelmsford. And so one night this week they did that. That is private. That is not solicited by the town, because there's also town scholarships in Chelmsford, which is a little different. But everything is generated by private money. And there's different ways in which you can donate, and minimums and maximums and details on those scholarships that's in Chelmsford. And apparently you have something very similar in Lowell. Most communities have their scholarship funds. When we have an education fund, that's slightly different. A town scholarship fund by tax checkoff. In other words, everyone that pays the taxes has the right to, check this box and donate a certain amount. It could be $1, it could be a quarter.
Unknown caller.
It could be any kind of money that you want to have. You could donate $100 to the education fund in Chelmsford. You could round your taxes up. If people did all of that, then we would be very, very well funded for anything, and we could increase the amount that we give, but that doesn't seem to happen. But you have that, all that tax base. Chelmsford is at, when you talked about raising the taxes in Lowell, Chelmsford is at the top of what they can give, according to Proposition 2.5, but Lowell isn't. And so you will have a real surprise in your bills when they start raising the taxes the way other communities have, because Lowell as a city gets a lot of money from the state. They also will get money from the federal government. But if they're going to get rid of different things, and now you have a different way of accessing funds, in that transition period, you may have some serious financial issues, and the finances kind of run the roller coaster over the years, just like enrollment. So we've got. I think that everybody has some challenges, not just in Chelmsford, but apparently you've got some of the financial challenges in Lowell. Some of it had to do with how they spent the money, the ARPA funds for during COVID. If they put them into things that was reoccurring expenses, now they have an issue. It was one-time money. You've got to use it on a one-time item. So we'll see how that all goes.
Well, I'll say something quick about Chelmsford. A few years back, I had a friend, a family that lived in Chelmsford. Hansberry's was their last name, and their son came out of Chelmsford High School in the top 10 anyways. Very smart kid, and he went on to Bentley College. He was an offensive lineman for the football team. It's Division II football. And this year, you have Salapoli's son that went to Bentley. I'm not sure if he's out of there yet, but he got invited to the mini camp for the Patriots, New England Patriots. So two very good football. And Division II football, I followed it a few years ago from Bentley, because I like Jack Hansberry. He's been out for years, but Chelmsford keeps rolling out some kids like that all the time. Even in hockey, you got some guy there, you got a pro hockey player. Your system just is incredible, and I hope some of the stuff that you do in Chelmsford rubs off on the city of Lowell, because we need help.
Well, we do
need
share
help.
enough of it in this program, and there are people that are listening.
Yeah.
But there are also best practices, and that's where Eric comes in, is that he knows what the best practices are, and he wants to apply from what it was as his job to what goes on in the whole city. And so he is an excellent member of that. I hope he gets reelected. There's a couple of other things just to talk about. We do have our guest, which can join us at any point in time here, early if you...
You don't have a chair for me.
We will have a chair. Just wait a minute. So let me finish.
We need to go to break.
I understand, but I'll let you know. So anyway, there's just a few other things I thought that I had sent you guys out some articles on. One of them was that they did vote separately to have a bill for no tax on tips. There's caps, with regard to income and how much income you make, and then how much you're going to get with the tips, and they're concerned about how businesses are going to then kind of finagle the minimum wage, and people aren't going to have as much money as they think they would. But at least they did work with Nevada on that, because they had the most people that would be getting the tips in
How
that
about
particular
on our
state.
social security? How's that? Is there no tax on social security?
Not
Is
yet.
that happening?
This was
No?
just a separate article, and everybody was surprised because of how many people voted for it. I'm not sure, it was a bipartisan bill, and, which is what you like to see, so that everybody is working together and not at odds with one another because they don't like your political party. A couple of other things,
I like to give cash tips, by the way. I think cash
Glenn
tips
likes
are
to do that.
best.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes you don't, and it just depends on where you are and the service
Yeah.
that you receive.
Yep.
And it's always nice to be able to do stuff like that. And sometimes you give more because it's just the way it is. And then there's other services that you may tip also, and then there's always guidelines. So if anybody out there is wondering, what percentage do I give and to whom, you can just ask your telephone, or you look on the computer and it'll give you a whole list. And there's also new programs that are out there that you have your little kiosk thing that's at your table when you go to a restaurant, and it can calculate it all for you when you want to hit 5%, 10%, 15, 20, whatever it is, and you don't have to do any math anymore, which some people will like. The weather's supposed to be really bad. Today's Thursday. It seemed to be delayed a little bit. We're having a northeaster, so everybody be careful. It is the long weekend. We hope people will stay safe as if they have any plans with regard to that, but it's supposed to rain part of the weekend, so that kind of can put the kibosh on some plans that people may have. There's a couple of other things I thought was interesting that I forwarded you guys, and one of them was that Poland is preparing for war. I thought that you kind of feel like you're going back in history, and you're kind of like reliving something that happened quite a while ago, like 50, 60 years ago, they're very much concerned about what Russia's going to do. And it appears as though Trump is having a definite uphill climb on trying to get peace between Ukraine and Russia, and also as far as the Middle East goes. But at least we have somebody that's working on it. Then you have all of the books that's coming out about the former president and the different cover-ups, and they're still trying to figure out who was actually running the country, because it didn't seem as though that the person that we elected was. So I'm not into conspiracy theories, but I am looking forward to seeing what kind of investigation is out there with regard to that.
I feel real good about the border being secured only because of dangerous drugs. And it's getting better. I've seen
I
some
always
numbers,
thought-
I've seen some numbers that's, as far as deaths go, it's improving. And that was a big issue in that last election.
But there's still plenty of drugs in this country.
No, I understand that. You're never gonna, but if you want to talk world peace and stuff like that, I'm glad we have two big oceans around this country. I'm really glad, because it's dangerous. The world's dangerous right now. It's all I worry about is how I'm gonna leave my 5 grandchildren. That's it. Nothing else. And I think a lot of us voted that way this last time.
I think that people voted on the basis of safety, and they get tired of having false information out there. I would say that what's interesting, this is very much of an aside, we've talked about this before. My mother is in long-term care, and she doesn't like watching the television. However, she's sharing a room. I don't think my mother shared a room for the past 65 years with anybody, but now she's sharing a room. All right, well, the person is not 100%, but she has a TV on. So obviously, my mother is pretty much, she has no choice with regard to television, and she can see it, even though, she has the sight of only of one eye, but she can see it and she can read it without glasses. But they put CNN on, and she's getting very anxious about what she is listening to. And I said, Ma, it's all biased. They've got one message out there. It's really unfortunate. I said, you need to have them change the station so that at least you have some kind of varied programming.
Just tell them they're atheists. They're atheists, Ma. Change the channel.
No,
I don't know, I want to get her involved in that particular conversation currently,
No,
but
I love when you-
usually gets
she's
rid of a
doing
lot of
pretty
people.
good at 104.
I love when you talk about this issue, because we're all going to get old, and when I hear 12, 14, 16,000 a month to pay for something like your mother's in right now, and once you, what happens when your money runs out? I'm curious.
Oh, okay, so what happens when your money runs out is that you have mass health, and that's part of that Medicare, Medicaid issue. And you have to apply to the state for the aid. You have to have a look back of 5 years of all your financial information. They will take a look at all of your bank accounts, if you have stock holdings, if you have bonds, anything that you can liquidate except a house, depending upon if you're the sole owner or if you have a spouse. So they don't turn the spouse out of the house. But they have to be able to live there. So they look at all of the finances and then they take them because your ability to pay is primary. So in doing the mass health application, you have to prove that you no longer have any resources to be able to pay that monthly bill. And sometimes it takes 3 months. And after they do all of their financial background and research, they will also determine, if you have a spouse, how much that spouse will get of the money to be able to live so that they don't have to go on any financial assistance within the state or the federal government. They do not take into account if you have a lot of debt, but if you sell your house, then that money will then go towards your care, which is what happened with my mother. So by the time she got to be 100, pretty much a lot of money was gone. She's not on mass health yet, on financial services yet. I don't think my sister wants me to talk about all the details, but I'm going to talk in generalities as much as I can here. A house was sold. Her share of the house, obviously that's an asset, that had to be spent down. So as soon as you can't pay, now you apply. I don't know if you get your own lawyer or if the facilities may have their own lawyer to represent you. And then the government will then pay for your room and board. They cannot discriminate between people who can pay and people who can't pay. They're not supposed to, anyway. You will have a small budget that you can work with. So if you have...
You get $60 a month.
If you have private insurance, medical insurance, that is an amount of money that they will allow you, because that's less money that the state has to pay for your care, goes to a private insurance company. So it's cheaper that way. So if you have an HMO, if you have Tufts, if you have Blue Cross Blue Shield, if you have anything like that, you have a separate policy, they will allow you, or at least they did the last time I checked when my uncle needed assistance way back, they allowed him to keep his Blue Cross Blue Shield. So that is part of that monthly budget that is I don't know, that they allow you to have. They will give you a certain amount for amenities, toothpaste, soap, whatever. If he had a separate cost for his television. Currently, in this facility, there isn't. So that would be there. If you subscribe to a newspaper, that amount of money would be there so that you can have that. If you have a hairdresser, that amount of money is in that budget. But that doesn't amount to very much money per month. I mean, you might be at $2,000 a month or $1,000 a month that you're allowed, but anything and everything else they attach. If you have pensions, if you have Social Security, annuities, any of that stuff, they will attach. Then when you die, then if you had that house and you sell it, there's a lien against it, so that they are trying to recoup their money. So all of these things happened when my uncle went into long-term care. So I don't have to talk about it in terms of my mother, but I can certainly give people some information with regard to that. And if you're looking for a place, there are services out there that charge between $250 and $500 an hour to be able to do what I've been telling people to do, and I'm not charging anybody anything.
I love when
Okay, I
you,
want to put this in there. To you old timers out there, if you're 60 and you own a house, now's the time to consider putting your house into a trust. If you put the house into a trust, that can turn into an irrevocable trust, but a trust where you're in charge of it. that automatically turns into an irrevocable trust should your health decline. And you can have keywords in there that automatically turn into an irrevocable trust. But that's lawyer talk. When your house is in a trust, you don't own it anymore. So people, you get a call on the phone, are you the homeowner? No, I rent. You don't own the property anymore. So you have all the luxuries of ownership, but you don't have the burdens of ownership.
Well, you still have to pay
So if you know a
taxes.
lawyer, sit down with the lawyer, ask her or him, look at how do I situate myself so that if one of the elastic bands up in my head breaks and I have to go into a nursing home, I don't want to pay for it. I've been paying taxes my whole life. I want the government to pay for my care, and I want my family to enjoy my wealth. And you set it up that way, so when you do go to a nursing home, it's coming out of the government's pocket, not coming out of your pocket. So if you're 60 or over, at least consider putting your house into a trust. Thanks.
That's why-
Back to you, Evelyn.
Well, there's another piece to this. Actually, there's a lot of pieces to this. They have a 5-year look back. So as you age, none of us are going to live forever, and you never know what is going to happen as far as strokes, heart attacks, and then end up into different, one of these facilities. And so with a 5-year look back, you should make sure that if you do any of those changes, for 5 years, nothing changes with your health. And that's why you can do something sooner than later versus waiting until you're 60 or better. You also have different ways you can have your deed so that when you die, then you actually, your interest in your property goes away. And that's what happened with my uncle, is that he set the deed up. When he died, that lien on that property went away because he no longer had any financial interest in it. It went to the other people that were on the deed. And my mother set that up, except that there's other circumstances I won't go into with regard to selling that house. So there are some things that you do. Some people do not want an irrevocable trust because then you have no control over any of it. So the suggestion is that depending upon what course of action you'd like to go down, route you want to go down, make sure that you have a lawyer that is experienced in all of the estate planning, and you know exactly what you want, and you ask an awful lot of questions before you legally go into, especially, excuse me, an irrevocable trust, because it's exactly that. You can't go back. So that's something that my parents never wanted to do because they would lose control over all of it. And regardless of what it might be or not be, you still have an attachment that the government can put on any of the assets that you have. So anyway, with all that information,
I'm glad you bring that
again,
up
you
because
need
it
to go to
affects every
lawyer.
family,
Yeah.
sooner or later.
You're both
every
talking.
family.
Yeah, I understand how that
But-
works.
but-
It's, but anyway, so pretty much I've gone through an awful lot of the stuff that, I had sent you guys, some articles. We talked about Healy, putting more money into trying to alleviate some of our energy bills, of the problems that she created. So let's create a crisis and then let's solve it and it'll look really good. There's just craziness with regard to that. They're going to close shelters because obviously with the immigrants or aliens or whatever you want to call them, some people like to call them visitors. Anyway, with what that's going on, those shelters aren't being operated anymore. I would like to know how they're going to operate them for homeless people. Where are they all going?
Lowell. They come to Lowell.
Well,
That's what's been happening. We get more than the average for the Merrimack Valley, that's for sure. They're going to keep the UMass Conference Center open for them, which will help out a certain amount of people, but not a whole lot. And homelessness is going to be tough.
How about some good news? What did it's actually Mrs. Thoren bake?
She bakes something every time she comes here. She bakes us something.
well, we'll have John have something after the break.
Just before our announcements, we'll put that out there.
Well, yeah.
Everyone's
So-
favorite part of the show.
Oh, yeah, I hate announcements. I would like it if you, had one every so often throughout the show, but having them all at one time. How many minutes do you think you're going to have this morning of announcements?
5.
Well, that's not too bad. Sometimes they've gone on like for a long time.
Well, I can go on for like an hour, because I have stuff that goes the whole summer, like the farmers markets every Friday. I could talk about that for a little bit. I'll move as swiftly as I can, because we got, Tewksbury's got a big parade on Monday. Want to talk about that a little bit, so, what's, Chelmsford doing for Memorial Day? Do you have any idea?
They usually have a parade, and they alternate by year, whether it's in North Chelmsford or it's in the center of Chelmsford.
So there might be a parade, you don't know?
Well, there's always been some kind of a parade in Memorial Day, just like there always is something on on July 4th.
Okay, well, Tewksbury has big extravagant, the parade they have in Tewksbury is awesome. But that's okay. Conversation for another day.
Okay,
One word stuck in my head all morning has been the word tutors, the tutors. I'm worried about losing tutors in Lowell. That's to me is like losing a quarterback.
Well,
Really, I feel that much. I feel pain knowing tutors are going to be pink slipped maybe coming up in the next couple of weeks. That's what we're hearing.
well, I think
It's
that,
crazy. Paraprofessionals. Come on, Evelyn. Think about that. Those two
I don't
things.
have to think about it.
All right,
We
just-
did it when I was on the school committee. There was a
Yeah.
lot of stuff that you got rid of. What's interesting is how much stuff they've put in since I left. We have assistant principals. A lot of the positions that we reduced in the administrative offices, they've hired people there. But like I had said before, the money that was one-time money that came in from the federal government, they only spent on one-time items. It wasn't reoccurring. There's a lot of cities and towns in Massachusetts where they took that money and they hired people. Now they have to support them or they have to get rid of them because they don't have the funds to support it, because that money dried up. So there's a lot of interesting things that.
I have a
that
lot
occur.
of teachers say to me, they talk to me because they know I'm pro-teacher, and I'm always going to try to look for a pay raise for them, okay? So they talk to me and I say to them, look what happened to me. They promoted me from the 3rd to the 4th grade, and right now they're talking discipline. That's all they say to me, discipline. We need discipline. I said, well, I look back at myself in the 3rd grade. If you didn't send me to the 4th grade, I couldn't read. I couldn't read, and I faked my way all the way to my junior year till I met a housemaster at Lowell High School. I shouldn't say the word housemaster anymore, but a female housemaster that put me against the wall and said, Mr. Hoey, you should join the Army. It saved my life. It did, because I faked my way through. I couldn't read, and that's what causes disruption. Look at a 3rd grade class. You might have some that can read at a 5th grade level because their parents are working with them. But more than half of the class in Lowell are lucky if they can read at a 1st grade level. And what do you do in the 3rd grade? You send them to the 4th, right? And guess what? They move on with that same person that can read at a higher level, and they just move on with them, and they cause
Bob, you never
disruptive.
stayed
I
back?
was disruptive. I've made everybody laugh. And I'd get the ruler right across the street. See, that's why I'm glad we didn't close them curtains. I went to that school 4 different times. I bounced to 12 different public schools. Why? My mother was 16. There was a divorce. We got 15,000 students in this system. Can you picture what they need? Special ed, we don't talk about that in Lowell. We don't even mention special ed. Why? It's the biggest part of our budget. Why talk about that?
Well,
Silence.
I don't recall in public school education anybody hitting anybody, and I was very much interested in education.
You don't remember anybody getting hit in grammar school?
Absolutely. And I was in the city of Quincy. In my elementary school, no one ever got hit.
That was the best school across the street for getting
We
a
got
ruler.
hit all the time.
Me too.
Well, no, nobody got hit.
It wasn't every second of the day, but
Hey.
not a day went by when a nun didn't give a kid a crack.
Right,
John,
but I didn't go to
I'm
a
glad to know
religious
it happened
school.
in
That's
public
school.
schools, too.
So we're gonna
I know
be
you
going
are,
to
but
break
I
shortly,
gotta
but
end that with this, please. John, when I got
We
elected to the
got
school,
90 seconds. What's your problem?
when I
Look,
got
someone had to say
elected to
something
my
else.
first school committee, I went up to every teacher over here at the Rogers School, because that's where I got most of my discipline. And I went up to him and said, hey, remember hitting me? I'm Bob Hoey. I'm on the school committee now. Oh, you can't tell people we hit you? I said, let me tell you something. I'm going to give you a pay raise. No contract will sit on the table. I love teachers. Teachers made my life. They made my life. And I didn't graduate from high school, but I've been elected to the Lowell School Committee 4 times. 4 times. I've never lost. I might lose this time, but I don't care about losing.
Well,
I
the-
care about advocating for
Right.
schools and teachers, period.
And that's what you usually, when you run for office, you're able to actually, put out all those things, and then sometimes you drive what the conversation will be in debates and in other people's campaigns.
My
which would be
favorite thing
good.
is to crank you up on an issue. That's my favorite thing on a Thursday. It really is. It's fun.
Anyway, we're gonna go to break in about 20 seconds, but
We'll be back
this is.
next.
Good morning, everybody. We're back for the next about an hour on City Life. I'm Evelyn Thoren. I am your host, and Bob Hoey is my co-host this morning. Sam Chase isn't with us. He had a prior commitment. We got John McDonough behind the camera, sometimes on the camera, always giving his 2 cents, but I think with inflation, it may be up to 8 or 10, isn't it? So our guest this morning is Bill Olson, and there are some issues in Chelmsford that we asked him to come on because there will be a public hearing and discussion on that issue. I really want to talk about education, but we will get to that when we can. But Bill, why don't a lot of people may not know who you are, which I find unusual, but you never know. And why don't you tell people, who you are and some of your background in that, and kind of set the stage, for our discussion this morning.
All right, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. I've been a lifelong resident of Chelmsford, a lifelong resident of North Chelmsford, for that fact. Proud graduate of the wonderful class of 1966 at Chelmsford High School. Graduated from what is now UMass Lowell with an industrial engineering degree. Went to Babson College for my MBA. And interestingly, wound up in the profession of education and have been in that profession for the last 55 years. I was introduced to education when I was in undergraduate school at what was Lowell Technological Institute at the time. And a good friend of mine, a very good friend who was an outstanding teacher and administrator, Ted Rorak, he and I were very, very good friends and still are. He and I began substitute teaching on our days that we had no classes in college. And so after I graduated, I had a very good offer for a job out at Xerox Corporation in Rochester, New York. Absolutely hated Rochester, New York. And so I came back home here and said to my folks, I'll start up my interviews again. About 3 days after I arrived home, Chet Summers, who was the assistant superintendent of schools in Lowell at the time, happened to call me and say there was this teacher that I had been doing some substitute teaching for, who was going to be out ill for the last 5 weeks of the school year, and would I take the class? So I took it. I found out that I absolutely loved teaching. I was teaching math, and they offered me a full-time position the following year, and I said, okay, well, I'll take the full-time teaching position. I'll teach for a year, get my MBA, and then I'll move on to the private sector. But I couldn't be pulled away from education. I enjoyed it that much. Coming away from it every day, thinking that I was making a difference in the life of a particular child or group of children. And so that was very, very important to me. Dr. Henry Mraz hired me as the Title I director. I worked in federal programs for about 10 years, and then he appointed me. He was wonderful to me. He appointed me as the assistant superintendent of schools in Lowell in 1984, I believe it was. And then I was recruited to go out to Westford. Spent 35 years in the Westford Public Schools, retired after 51 years in education in Massachusetts, and I've been the superintendent of schools in Merrimack, New Hampshire now for the last 4 years. And want to keep going. I've got one more year to go. I told them I'd stay 5 years because I'm not the future of the school district, and I'll look to do some interim superintendencies after I leave Merrimack. So it's been a wonderful career. Been rewarding in the respect that we've all, working together, tried to make the difference in the lives of every student.
After everything you said, all
Mike's off, Bobby.
pardon me?
Mike's off.
Okay. It's not working. Oh, yes, there it is. After listening to your opening remarks, you mentioned Ted Rorak, which I'm a big fan of, okay? I was only 12 years old when you graduated from high school, and I'm trying to figure out why you and Ted Rorak look so good for your age. All right, but no, Ted is a fabulous guy, and his son's great with baseball and children too, so. But where'd you work? Westford Academy, was that part of your area? The
Well,
Westford
I
Academy?
worked in Westford for 35 years. I was the assistant superintendent
Okay.
and then the superintendent of schools. And, obviously Westford Academy, which some people still think is a private high school, I'm not. It was, obviously our high school. So it was 16 years in Lowell. Enjoyed every year here. For an urban school system, it's a wonderful district. It's a wonderful school system. When I first started here, we had 17,000 students, and over the course of the 16 years I was here, that enrollment declined to about 13,000 students. So I'm not sure where it is.
Around
right
14.5.
now. Yeah, so it's
Give or take
remained
100 or
relatively
two.
stable then.
Yeah. Well, what happened in Lowell, obviously, when your test scores go down in a lot of different nationalities, demographics, if you look at Lowell High School, you have all kinds of people. We have 70, I believe, above languages, different languages in our school, and we've lost a lot of, what I like to say, some of our best students. It was a lot of people were attracted to Westford because your school system is so good. We used to have the top 200 kids would all have the same name, Patel, all of them. Graduation, 200 out of 300 would be at the top. We're down to maybe two Patels now because they moved to Westford. That's how important schools are. Chelmsford's another place they moved to. A lot of my friends have moved to Chelmsford. Not many have moved to Westford because that's a little bit
High
steeper
price.
for them. Yeah, it's high priced. But do you have school choice there? Are there open
Yes.
seats in
In
that system?
Westford, yes, we had school choice. In Massachusetts, every school district, once school choice, which was part of the ed reform legislation many years ago, once that ed reform legislation was passed, districts were automatically enrolled in the school choice program unless they opted out. We always had school choice because it was a very important source of funds. As you know, Proposition 2.5, Proposition 2.5 was passed when I was in the city, and I remember the first year we lost over 300 staff members, which was devastating. And it's been a real struggle in Massachusetts for years because everything has indexed upwards, including salaries, benefits, insurances, many times in excess of 2.5% of last year's tax levy plus new growth. And so it has been a real struggle. The trick in Westford was to not expand to too great an extent in years where revenues were stronger, because that meant you had to cut back more deeply in most of the years in which revenues were relatively scarce, whether they be state, local, or federal in nature. And so the trick was to try and maintain as much stability in staffing and programming as possible. And that's what I think we we were fortunately able to do, because we planned very closely from a fiscal perspective, from a programmatic perspective, but the school choice revenues were extraordinarily important because we had no alternative sources of funding. The Finance Committee in Westford used to have a reserve fund that was probably $150,000 to $200,000, and as we all know, one accident, one incident could consume all of that revenue in 1 second. So that the school choice, we used to take in between $500,000 and $750,000 a year in choice money.
Yeah, Chelmsford also had, when I was on the school committee every year, we had to vote whether we wanted to or not have it. And because we were overcrowded, then those years we would say, we would have the vote and we would say no. But once our enrollment began to decline and we had spaces, what we tried to do was to open it up wherever we had the spaces in order to gain revenue. I mean, it's like $5,000 a child, but it's $5,000 you didn't have. And then there was a lot of screening that went on with regard to that, and hopefully you didn't end up having, special education, so that, because everybody was looking to get either out of Lowell or out of someplace and get into a different kind of a system. So we just didn't want it to cost us more money than what it was that we were gaining. But we've talked about that. A lot of people may not understand how the school choice works. Sometimes you wonder whether or not it's misnamed. But that was kind of, that's of interest.
Yeah, in Lowell, we had, when I was on the school committee, we had school choice, but only in the high school. We were full, all our seats were filled pre-K to 8, couldn't get in. So, but when I asked, like, if Westford had school choice, so if there's openings in Westford, someone from Lowell, let's say, could apply to go there and maybe get accepted, correct?
Yes, as long as there is an opening, because every school district has to declare how many seats there are in each respective grade level, and you have to document that to the Department of Education every year. We tended not to have school choice at the high school level by design, because what we were finding over the first several years of school choice is students who had a lot of difficult issues at their hometown school district were looking to move on and essentially get out of town and try somewhere else. And there were lots of issues that developed, no matter how hard we would try, and I'm sure other school districts have faced the same issue. Some students bring a lot of difficult issues and struggles to the high school, and so we stopped accepting students at the high school level, focused mostly at the elementary level with some at the middle school level also.
So I just want to pick your brain for one more thing, an opinion on, Texas has passed a school choice thing, and they give people around approximately $11,000 in cash to go to the schools of their choice. What do you think of? I know in Massachusetts that's a tough issue, but what do you think of that issue? Just your opinion. That's all.
My opinion has always been, if states appropriately funded public education, we wouldn't have to look at programs like school choice. Oftentimes, the same type of program operates in New Hampshire, where they've reduced the income level and providing direct payments to parents. And so, there is some benefit to it, but I've always been a proponent that if you adequately fund public education, great things will continue to happen. When you begin to reduce that level of funding, it becomes a struggle. You mentioned previously about cutting out tutors and paraeducators. Well, those are some of the unsung heroes in school systems. Everybody matters. Everybody makes a difference. My title for years has been the superintendent of schools. That doesn't mean I'm any more important or do anything more to help a system than the person who's making 1/10 that money and in a classroom every single day with a student. And the trick is to try and support them adequately with funding, with salaries and benefits, but with materials and supplies, provisioning schools so that we can meet the different needs of students. I always tell teachers, prospective teachers, when I meet them, that we're all different, which we all know that, which essentially makes us all the same. that we are all different, and we have to be able to adequately understand what the needs of students are and address those needs effectively. And it becomes increasingly difficult when you have minimal revenues. In where I am right now in New Hampshire, there is no sales tax, there is no state income tax, and so the homeowner bears an extraordinary burden of taxation on residential property taxes. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to fund education, and particularly special education in New Hampshire right now.
So in the delivery of education, though, it's pretty much the same, the teachers in the classroom. Do they have, in New Hampshire, though, do they have the same requirements as Massachusetts in terms of professional development? All teachers have master's degrees. Did they have any kind of tests like we did with regard to the teachers passing certain tests?
Yes, there are definitely certification requirements in New Hampshire. I find the Department of Education in New Hampshire to be a little bit more challenging to work with than the Department of Education has been in Massachusetts, but there are certainly certification requirements in the state. Teachers, there isn't necessarily the same requirement in Massachusetts of a master's degree within a certain number of years, but that is expected, and most quality teachers certainly keep going with their education as far as they possibly can. And so the problem right now is, since the pandemic, it's like 3/4 of the labor force, and potential labor force, has disappeared. Every school district is struggling to find not only classroom teachers for the regular education program, but special education teachers in particular. They're just not out there, and that's a very, very serious problem that we're facing in New Hampshire right now, and I'm sure across the region.
I got a million questions today, Evelyn, I could ask, but since you just mentioned special ed, I always had a feeling that speech pathologists, for instance, a big part of teaching a child how to read. I know tutors are awesome for sitting in front of children to teach them how to read. That's something I wish I had back in my day. I didn't have that. But back in my day, I worked 2.5 jobs to support my family. So I wasn't helping my wife that much as a father with my children, because I was always working to pay bills. But now it seems like there's a lot of fathers doing more than it was back in my day. That's just how I feel personally. But I think the most important thing right now is we need to somehow, in the city of Lowell, is to get parents more involved with their children, because I think they're either too busy or on too many cell phones. Or I do better as a grandfather. I was, like I said, as a father, I was never home, so I didn't help. Other than if they did something wrong, my wife would say, you got to correct that one or correct this one, that type of thing. But teachers to me were everything. They were everything to me. I lost my parents young through divorce. My sisters went into foster care. That's what we're dealing with, I believe, a majority of children in our city that have major issues. And to me, you sound so good. I would have hired Ted Rorak as superintendent, okay? I really mean that.
I was hoping at one point in time that Ted would be the superintendent of schools. Ted is one of the finest people walking the face of the earth. His folks were just wonderful. His folks were in concentration camps in Poland, and two of the most honorable people. Unfortunately, both deceased right now. But Ted was not only of a great mind, but one of the most outstanding gentlemen that you could ever meet. And he and I have been very, very close friends for many, many years. And I'm glad, that I became acquainted with Ted in college, and that we formed a friendship. You mentioned families. I think the same thing happens in suburbs also. People are overscheduled. Certainly different issues in the suburbs versus the urban areas. What I found in Lowell over the years that I worked here was most parents were very grateful for what you could do for their child. When I meet with them, they'd say, Mr. Olson, thank you for, helping with this, or they would talk with their teacher or someone else in the school system, and they were very, very grateful. And I find that to be the case in most instances. Sometimes you'll have a parent that will come up to you and tell you how much you've ruined their child's life. But, those comments are few and far between, and in those cases, there are lots of things going on outside of the school environment that are impacting a child's life. But that, and you mentioned the importance of teachers. When I interview people, because I happen to be a superintendent who wants to interview every single teacher who is employed in a district. I did so in Westford, and I'm doing so in Merrimack. Thank you. Because I want to know who I'm putting before children, because I don't want to hire an average person. I want to hire an outstanding, exceptional person. And I always ask them, as part of the interview, to name me a favorite teacher that they had in life. And it doesn't take them more than 2 or 3 seconds. And when you think of the power of a great teacher and the difference that they have made in all of our lives, I can think back to those in Chelmsford when I was growing up, and a few at Chelmsford High School who were wonderful. Ed Quinn being one of them, Don Boucher, Angie Toronto, others, who were so much more than just a teacher in a classroom. They connected with us, they knew us, they inspired us, they motivated us, they believed in us, and even more importantly, they helped us believe in ourselves. And that's what a great teacher does. And they're worth it. As you said, you're a strong advocate for teachers. They're worth every penny.
Since you mentioned a few, I have to. Miss Generakis, a music teacher, Floyd McDonald, a gym teacher, and Mr. Kelly, I call him, Mr. Kelly, the teacher of discipline, all in that school across the street behind you right now. It's great to have you on the show, by the way, too.
Well, thank you.
There's nothing, to me, there is absolutely nothing. We got homeless problems, drug problems, you name it. All kinds of different issues in this city. Nothing is more important than schools.
Yeah, I would agree. And those problems, maybe on a different scale, but those problems are in evidence in every community across America, I think. Maybe more pronounced and frequent in urban areas, but certainly no community is immune from those issues.
Evelyn, I swear this is the last thing I want to ask him, okay?
No, you
Well,
ask me anything you want.
Well, my
Bob, I think you're going to think
I
of
have
more
a
stuff.
I have grandchildren that live in Townsend, obviously, and they're going to go to a trade school, one of them, and I'm excited about that because I believe that's one of our biggest issues in the city of Lowell. We don't have enough trade schools. But for years, I watched it because I went to public schools and I went to Lowell Trade School for 1 year. And I used to watch the teachers, and it was like a shop teacher and let's say a classroom teacher, the academic teacher. They didn't like each other for some reason. It was like there was a fight in there over that. I think it's gone now. Greater Lowell Technical High School is a tremendous school. But what do you feel about trade schools? Do we need more? Do you think we need more trade schools? Because I believe we
Vocational
do.
technical high schools are one of the greatest assets in the field of education. We do not have enough of them. One of the unfortunate things is the vocational shops and programs in individual high schools, particularly in this area of the country, disappeared because of economic issues. They were very costly. And now we have the regional vocational technical high schools. The importance of those is that I would occasionally attend a meeting of Mass Business Alliance for Education when I was in Westford. And they did a study about 15 years ago of about 300 industrial executives in terms of the skills that were needed. And 65% of the respondents at that time said that they were looking for employees with greater degrees of vocational skills. One of my issues is that they are not able to take enough students, and they have become selective. I used to talk with our legislators in Westford that I think extraordinarily highly of Neshoba Valley Technical High School, Greater Lowell Tech, and others, all of the vocational technical high schools. But sometimes they're excluding students who need those programs and could benefit from those programs the most. If I had my way, if there was the money, every local high school would have those vocational strands again, because when I was at Chelmsford High School in the mid-'60s, if you were in the college track, you had little opportunity to take automotive mechanics or carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, and so.
Oh, you got a fan club out there, and the guy sends me a text. John, you would give Mr. Olson a shout from his friends in Drake, a super present and great educator, a superhuman being, always thought about the children in this district.
Very good. That makes my day, because sometimes, as a superintendent of schools, you're presiding over the complaint department. Nobody ever comes to you when things are going well. It's always a problem. But the most important thing in this profession is you can't take things personally. You're dealing with people's children and their tax dollars, which are two very, very, very important issues to them. And the trick is to try and give them the money's worth each and every day. And I will say that, when we hire teachers, and please stop me because I like to talk, and that's a fault of mine.
Well, when you're
So-
done, I'm going to go to announcements. So.
Okay. When I look to hire teachers, I look for what I call in this profession my 8 Ps. And I'd love to write a book about them someday, and that's preparation, pride, professionalism, passion, great passion for educating children, patience, persistence. You have to have a good personality, but you have to put all those things into performance. Great resume, great interview mean nothing unless you come out every day and demonstrate those before children.
I'm glad you didn't say price.
Okay, I'm going to shut your mics off over there, and we're going to do some announcements. We'll be back. You guys can chit-chat. Be about 5 minutes doing this. Okay, so coming up on Memorial Day out in Tewksbury, a big extravaganza every Memorial Day. And so this is a slide. If you want more information, take your phone over your screen, take a picture of this. A lot happening out in Tewksbury. Starting at 10 a.m. at Tewksbury Center over at the cemetery. I got another slide about this too. And I want to thank Mark Crappen for sending me these slides. A lot crisper than what we had yesterday. If we can read everything. So these are all the things that are going on Memorial Day in Tewksbury Town Center, all decorated and beautiful spots. So take a picture of this slide. This is what's going to be happening that day. And moving right along. If you're hungry later on today and you're over 60, come on over to Lowell Senior Center. Lowell Senior Center proud to have lunch 7 days a week. Saturday, Sunday, every day. So today, the 22nd of May, they have liver and onions. Tomorrow there's a dinner dance. And so take your $2, get over there around 10:30 with $2. Give it to Tara. She's sitting at the front door. She'll give you a ticket. If you don't have the $2, just tell Tara and she'll give you a ticket anyway. So looking for $2. If you don't have it, we're going to feed you anyway. So great job. Now out in Chelmsford today, we have a baked potato bar. This is Chelmsford Senior Center. The rules are a little different out in Chelmsford. And I don't know if it's different from Lowell, but anyway, if you could be 60 or over and go into Chelmsford Senior Center, have a delicious lunch today. They're going to have baked potato, turkey, chili, cheese, sour cream, bacon bits, and pears. That's on today's menu. And if you're under 60, you can still go. It just costs a little bit more money. So 60, you pay $250. If you're under 60, you pay $450. So not a bad deal. So that's over Tewksbury Senior Center today. If you're cleaning out your closet, you got a lot of sheets and pillowcases and all kinds of good stuff that's gently used and you want to give it a new home, bring it over to St. Michael's. St. Michael's over in 543 Bridge Street in lovely Lowell, Massachusetts. There's a phone number down the bottom here. So take your phone over to the screen, take a picture of this slide, and give them a call and find out how you can donate. Send your gently used goods off to a better home. Bethesda Noon's having a party Saturday, May 24th. That's this weekend. He's going to have the Sampaio Mies restaurant. Only little trick is you got to make it RSVP. So it's $50 a ticket, and that's going to help re-elect Bethesda Noon to the city council at large. And you got to RSVP to these two phone numbers down. So if you want to go, just call either one of these people, and they'll be happy to put you there. There's a QR code in the bottom. If you zero in on that, that'll bring you to a website with more information. Neighborhood meetings. Today is the 22nd. So the Friends of Tyler Park are going to meet tonight at 6:30 at the Gertrude Bailey Elementary School. 6:30. So if you're up in the Highlands, Friends of Tyler Park, they're going to meet at the Bailey School tonight at 6:30 p.m. The Lowell Cops. You want to be a Lowell Cop? They're looking for people right this instant. So what you need to do is tomorrow, take your resume and cover letter, bring it in person to the LPD Training Center, 99 Middlesex Street, tomorrow. It says Monday through Friday, 7, but it says tomorrow. So, it's by tomorrow. So you can bring it today. The last day to bring it is tomorrow. And I get this set yesterday. So if you want to be a cop in Lowell, we're looking to have you. Bring your resume over to 99 Middlesex Street today or tomorrow. Thanks. Summer camp. Okay, so your kiddo likes gymnastics. Go back up there, Johnny boy. If you kiddo likes gymnastics, this is a place to go for the summertime. Be in touch with flippingoutgymnastics.com. And every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, 9 to 12, your kid's going to have a great time out in delightful Dracut at the flippingoutgymnastics.com. That's Mike Dillon and family that owns that operation. Good people. That's all about the parade that's happening on Monday. The ceremony's at 10, then the parade starts at 11. So that's out in Tewksbury. A mass for people, if you've got cancer, somebody has cancer that you love, and you want to, they're having a mass over the Immaculate Conception Church Wednesday, May 28th, Ascension Thursday Eve, 6:30 p.m. So go and pray for yourself if you have cancer, or somebody who you love has cancer. Danny Finn. Campaign fundraiser for Dan Finn, Thursday, May 29th at Cobblestones, 6 to 8 p.m. Hope to see you over there. He's running for City Council in District 3. Corey Robinson, he's having a party. He's having a re-election party at the Dompolsky Club over in Centerville, Monday, May 30th, 5:30 to 9:30 p.m. Hope to see you over there. That's for Corey Robinson on Monday. If you need some prayers for anything, these are the gals you can count on. The Monastery of St. Clair. Give them a call. There's a phone number there. They usually answer the phone. If they don't, just leave them a voicemail and say, look, please pray for my mother, my brother. Please pray for me. And they will do it. These gals are great. They have a good connection to God. So they've helped me out a lot. So that's why they're up there. These gals are great. In lovely Lowell, Memorial Day, Lynn Daigle brought this to me yesterday. Thank you, Lynn. And Saturday, May 31st, from 12 to 3 at the JFK Plaza, 375 Merrimack Street in lovely Lowell. That's right next to Lowell City Hall. The City of Lowell invites you to attend the Memorial Day ceremony. I can't say that word. An event held at the Veterans and Families. Join us for posting the colors, present the Lowell Police Department Color Guard, Pledge of Allegiance presented by Scouts of America, Touch a Truck, and food trucks. So that's going to be happening in lovely Lowell on Saturday, May 31st. Okay, Bill Olson's here to talk about the trucks in Chelmsford. That's coming up next. Greek Festival, that's coming up in June. We'll talk about more when we get there. End of school's almost here. Corey Blanche is going to have a thing to come and meet him, a town hall meeting. That's out in June. We'll talk about that again. That's my announcements. Ev, going back to you, and your mics are back on right now.
You got to go on the attack of this and too complacent with this issue.
We're back.
Yes, you are.
So welcome back to City Life. We will probably end about Glenn said 7:59 and 28 seconds. It goes off in
Well,
Chelmsford.
it continues on
I know
YouTube until
that,
I stop.
but I'll say goodbye for Chelmsford at that point in time. Anyway, I guess Bill Olson, one of the reasons I had asked him to come in is because there is an issue in North Chelmsford, and we've been talking about education, and we can certainly continue to talk about education if anybody out there has any questions, if you're listening to us live. And if you aren't listening to us live and you see us in Chelmsford on Sunday and next Tuesday, because it is repeated, and you do have any questions, just text the phone number at the bottom, and we'll try to address your questions. Excuse me, with regard to whatever it might be on this particular program. So I'm going to turn it back over to you to discuss what the issue is on Ledge Road in North Chelmsford. You're on Main Street, so whatever comes out of Swain Road, you actually see, and anything going up and down Route 40, you see. So you
Yes,
can-
we're right at the intersection of Route 40 and Swain Road, and so all the trucks traveling to and from Newport Aggregate travel past our house, they turn. So we, and I will say it extends beyond Ledge Road. Ledge is kind of the epicenter of the regrettable activity that's been happening for a number of years now, since Newport bought the LeMagerie Quarry, which was the LeMagerie family, a long-time family in Chelmsford, excuse me, owned a small quarry operation, didn't intrude on anyone's life in the North Chelmsford area, and then fast forward to about 6-7 years ago when Newport acquired LeMagerie, and I think maybe one or two other small operations, and has turned it into a regional aggregate distribution center, both receiving materials and having trucks from across the region, not locally, but across the region, come in and pick up aggregate materials for highway projects, roadway projects, and general construction projects. And what's happened is this has stretched beyond Ledge Road and involves Groton Road, Route 40, Swain Road, Dunstable Road, and certainly Ledge Road, where all of the trucks begin to park 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. Our residential neighborhoods, and that entire area has been zoned residential, has been turned into a heavy industrial area. We have 14 to 20, sometimes 22-wheel trucks, thousands and thousands of pounds, hauling huge loads in probably 40,000 pounds, perhaps at least 40,000 pounds, traveling our roadways. Our roadways were not constructed to meet those needs, but even more so is the environmental impact that those trucks have had. We have been listening to loud jake brakes, squealing brakes, trucks struggling to stop at the end of Swain Road. As you know, there's a slight downward grade there. We hear the squealing all the time of the brakes, loud upshifting, downshifting. We've had stone frequently spilled on our roads, such that the residents of North Chelmsford find it hard to, when that happens, to either walk or bike or push a baby carriage on the side of the road. We've seen the street sweeper in our area of town more in the last 6 months than we have in the last 6 years because of the debris that's been spilled. Constant dust and diesel fumes. I will tell you, and this is no fabrication, several years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, we had some window contractors come to our house because we have an older home and aging windows, and we wanted to replace some of them. They were hoping to meet outside, to walk around the outside of the house with me. We had to move inside because the trucks run every 3 to 5 minutes. With that noise, we found it very difficult to talk with each other, to focus, to listen to what each other was saying. And so it has been an extraordinary impact on the Groton Road, Swain Road, Dunstable, and Ledge Road. And I need to obviously say one thing too, is my wife Sue has devoted about 90% of the work to this effort of stopping these trucks over the last 5 to 6 years. She has been untiring in dealing with this. She's working right now with Val Page. Val has done an outstanding job in terms of communication to the public. There's about 225 to 250 residences in the North Chelmsford area that are impacted by the trucks. I want to thank Representative Rodney Elliott also, who filed a bill about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, House Bill 3876. My wife and I, along with Val Page, went down to testify at the State House before the Joint Committee on Transportation. Now, unfortunately, that bill did not pass, and I think it did not pass because the Felices who own Newport had their lobbyists lobby strenuously, a number of legislators, and that bill was defeated. Now, I will say, to his great credit, the Chelmsford Building Inspector, Jose Negron, issued in last September a cease and desist order against Newport Materials. And that cease and desist order was because they had essentially created heavy industrial truck traffic in a residential zone, which was a non-conforming use of the private part of Ledge Road that was in Chelmsford. Now, they have appealed that to the Zoning Board of Appeals. That appeal has gone on for months and months and months to allow them to continue to operate. The town, I think, over the last several years has been a little bit reluctant to play hardball with Newport, but it's time. They have to be aggressive and go on the attack, because they represent the residents of North Chelmsford and Chelmsford in general. This is an issue that could affect any neighborhood in Chelmsford. So the building inspector issued that cease and desist order. There have been numerous continuances of the appeals hearing before the Zoning Board of Appeals. The next hearing date is Thursday, June 5th, at the Police Department Community Relations Room. That is extraordinarily important, and we're asking as many Chelmsford residents, because we may be located in North Chelmsford, but we are one town, and we care about residents across the entire town, and we hope they care about the North Chelmsford residents also. We're appealing to and hoping that the residents across the town will show up at this meeting to convince the Zoning Board of Appeals to uphold the building commissioner's cease and desist order. This has to stop. It is absolutely destroying our neighborhoods.
Bill, have you had any luck with them discontinuing the jake braking?
No, that's, when they carry their heavy loads, those brakes are really straining. And so whether they're coming down Route 40 from west to east and taking a left onto Swain Road, which is right in front of our house, we hear those brakes squealing all the time.
Well, I'm going to tell you a little story. I'm lucky enough to have a funeral home up in Belvedere called Mahoney Funeral Home. And for years, St. Mary's Cemetery sold their topsoil. So St. Mary's Cemetery owns a ton of land, Tewksbury and Andover. So what they did was they let a company, and I leave the company's name out of it because it's a different company than the one you're talking about, but they let this company come in, take the topsoil off, and they replaced it with something else. I don't know what they replaced it with, but this happened over years. And the complaint was the jake braking. Now, jake braking, just so you know, it's when a tractor trailer downshifts rather than uses brakes. So if you ever drove a standard car and you want to be lazy, or a motorcycle, if you want to slow it down, you just put it into lower gear. So on a motorcycle, when you put it into lower gear, there's a loud noise comes out of your exhaust pipe. When a tractor trailer, these diesel trucks, when they downshift and they don't use the brakes to slow them down, they use the engine and transmission to slow themselves down, which keeps their brakes a little cooler, but it's also a manly noise. And so once we complained, the uptick in jake braking in front of the Mahoney Funeral Home went continuous. Every time one of their trucks would be going by, they would deliberately downshift in front of the funeral home. Oh. Because just don't hit the jake brake when we're bringing the casket out, just be respectful. Not these clowns. Not the company you're talking about, different company. But I know what the jake braking thing is, and so I encourage you to tell your select board, jake braking is a $500 fine, and ticket these guys. Yeah. And that might help a little bit. Just put it into your ear. Thanks, Bill.
And I don't deny anyone the ability to make a living. They're all independent. To the greatest extent that I know, all independent truckers. Some of them more considerate than others. We hear blasting truck horns from time to time. And so, I think the town of Chelmsford has been somewhat reluctant to take on Newport. However, There is a case that I brought to the Zoning Board of Appeals back about two and a half months ago. That was a case that was litigated back in the 1960s. It was Goldblatt versus the town of Hempstead, New York. That was a case where the town of Hempstead was invoking essentially some policing powers to stop the excavation work that was being done by Goldblatt because it was affecting the health and welfare and safety of the community. Goldblatt argued in court, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, that essentially what the town was trying to do was deny them the ability to operate a business in the town of Hempstead. Went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that the town did have that authority if it was determined that that operation impacted the health and welfare and safety of the community. And I think that case could apply here. We just need to have our town council be aggressive to pursue this, and we need the town to be forceful in supporting, and the Zoning Board of Appeals to be forceful in supporting the cease and desist order, because it cannot continue. It is not sustainable. It is ruining the lives of everyone in the paths on the streets that I mentioned previously.
So you have the hearing on the 5th.
That's correct.
Now, it's just a hearing. Is there additional meetings with the Zoning Board of Appeals that they'll vote on things?
Well, we were expecting the ZBA to vote on the appeal by Newport several months ago, but Newport has asked for a delay so that obviously they can continue their operations. And so we're hoping that the Zoning Board of Appeals will take a vote at this upcoming meeting on June 5th and begin to bring this to a halt. See, part of the problem is all these trucks are coming off Route 3, but when the Newport Corporation established an asphalt plant in Westford, just over the Chelmsford line into Westford on Route 40, I happened to be the superintendent of schools in Westford at the time and knew, there was a lot of concerns from parents both in Westford and in North Chelmsford. But the planning board in Westford implemented a requirement, a condition that all trucks turn left coming out of Newport into Chelmsford, which did not do us any favors, certainly. And so that immediately increased the truck traffic. Once Newport purchased the major quarry and began to ramp up operations, that's when we really began to notice. Those trucks start at 5 to 5:30 in the morning. They go till about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, as I said, about 3 to 5 minutes every day, and oftentimes multiple trucks at the same time traveling down and to and from the operation on Ledge Road. So it has really had a significant impact, and once again, I would ask as many residents in Chelmsford as possible to show up at the ZBA meeting, because this has to stop. I know the River Neck Road families have been dealing with other expansion issues, corporations, and it's been a struggle in this town. And we just need to make sure that our public officials represent the residents of Chelmsford and not the businesses.
This isn't the first time, I believe, Chelmsford had a problem with asphalt plants, right? Didn't they have one on Littleton Road? There was a
Yes, there's
discussion
one
over the
over
years.
on, I think it's Oak Street. if
behind
I
me.
remember correctly.
Ev, can you read this one?
Having never met Mr. Olson, I must say I'm very impressed with the tone and pitch of his voice. It's almost pastoral. Some superintendents I had to interact with were not so calm and composed. Thank you. Jeannie Balkus.
So
It's
I'd like,
interesting because someone once said to me, you'd be a good minister.
well, before I ask you a question about K-Stock LoSa, I'd like to say this. I did 7 years on the school committee. You do a 2-year term in Lowell, okay? I've worked for 4 different mayors and 4 different superintendents in 7 years.
Yeah.
What do you think about that when I say that to you?
Well, right about now, in this point in our lives and history, short-term superintendents is not an anomaly. It is becoming more the norm. They're jobs that, they're high-pressure jobs. Parents are increasingly advocating for the children, as they should. And so you very infrequently now find a superintendent that spends more than 3 to 5 years in a community. And it's not that they're doing anything wrong, but once there's such a shortage also of candidates and people who are interested in the job, that basically the market is that people can move relatively easily from one community to the next. And so I'm not surprised that in every community, really, you know, I know very good friends with Jay Lang in Chelmsford. We're very fortunate to have him as the superintendent. Jay used to be the assistant superintendent for business in Lowell, and I was very glad to see him appointed as the superintendent in Chelmsford. And you know, he has about as long a tenure as anyone. I remember in meetings, regional meetings of the Merrimack Valley Superintendents Association, sometimes they'd ask, well, who's been in the job 3 years? Who's been in 5 years? Who's been in 10 years or more? And I was probably the only one in the room to, you know, one or two superintendents who would raise their hand, because I had been the superintendent in Westford for 16 years. And that's not the norm nowadays.
Well, thank you for the answer. And last thing there, Evelyn, thank you for all the time I spent talking to Bill here. Bill, tell us something about K-Stock-Losa.
Can we
Yeah.
finish
That's
this
done,
first?
we're gonna
Then
review,
Oh,
we'll end-
okay,
We'll end,
okay.
we'll end with the.
because we only
the-
got like 8 minutes.
No, I hear
Right,
you.
so on this particular issue, currently, there is only one way in and out of their operations. But isn't it possible that they can go towards Westford if they create a street that goes through their asphalt plant? Or do they have to have a bridge or something that goes around Route 3? And was there any consideration of having a separate entrance or exit onto Route 3 if most of these trucks are going in that direction?
Well, the problem with a separate off-ramp or on-ramp from Route 3 is that's probably 15 to 20 years in the making, and really it provides no immediate or even, you know, longer-term relief.
So Bill,
I think-
we can all agree that you're not gonna put these people out of business. What is the solution here?
Well, I
What would
think,
make the community not happy, nobody's gonna be satisfied? What would satisfy the community?
well, I think there has to be some more direct path to Newport Materials through perhaps land that they currently own, or adjacent land that would involve probably the purchase from a private owner to make a more direct route to their aggregate operations, because that is possible. It's just that I think the town of Westford has denied them the ability to construct any type of roadway, pathway, whatever you want to call it. About 3 to 5 years ago, I believe that was considered, but not allowed. The interesting part also is in terms of the planning board's order of conditions that required, one of the conditions requiring the trucks to turn left coming out of Newport. Now, this is Newport asphalt I'm talking about now on Route 40, taking a left onto Groton Road and coming into Chelmsford, is that I don't believe, I could be wrong, but I don't believe that the town received Department of Transportation approval to do that, which is required onto a state road. So, you know, that's more of a secondary issue, but the issue at hand right now is the aggregate operation, which is, and the concerning part also is there is a multinational corporation called Vinci, V-I-N-C-I, that has purchased Newport. They are in over 200 countries with over 200,000 employees around the globe, and their ambition is to expand operations in North America, which means we're probably going to have to deal with more and more enhanced and more frequent truck traffic and operations that are far beyond the scale of the capability of a residential neighborhood to handle. So June 5th, please, Zoning Board of Appeals meeting at the Police Station Community Room. We're looking for all our neighbors across the entire town of Chelmsford, as many as possible, to show up at that meeting and to ask the Zoning Board of Appeals to uphold the cease and desist order.
You also have a thing, if you can't go, what should you do? If I'm on vacation June 5th, I can't go, but it is important to me. What can somebody do who just can't be there?
You write to the zoning board of appeals, and the more communication they have to know the impact on the residents of this town and be willing to represent the residents and not a private business that is destroying the quality of life.
When you talk about the diesel fuel, I mean, like I said, we're going to run out of time. When you talk about the diesel fumes and the dust and a few other things, did the Board of Health ever get involved with taking any kind of samples or testing anything to see exactly what is going on up there environmentally?
Yes, I know that there have been some baseline tests and some follow-up tests. I happen not to have the results of those particular tests, and that's something that definitely needs to be followed up on also. So it's just between the noise, the dust, the diesel fumes, it's the breaking, the stone being spilled. We've had enough.
Bill, I frequently use Route 40 because that's the way I go to see my grandchildren in Townsend. I'll take Route 3, get on Route 40, and I run into all kinds of truck issues constantly.
Yeah.
That's how many trucks are. It's nonstop. Even the highways to me are terrible. I won't go near 495. I'll use Route 40. I think a lot of people use Route 40 just as a cut-through. That's how I feel, and trucks especially.
And trucks like the railway system make the country go, but they make the country go. They should be making the country go in appropriate areas and not creating heavy industrial conditions in a residential zoning area.
Good luck to you. Good luck to you.
Yeah, thank you.
So we don't run out of time because I know that Bob has this question.
No, I was
want to
just-
first thank you for coming in
Yeah.
today.
Thank you very much.
and
I hope
all
I
of the
can enjoy it
information.
again. I've enjoyed
Oh
it
yeah,
very
this is
much.
great.
He's actually given me flashbacks because he knows George Sapasavis, Ted Rorak, Kay Stocklosa. Why don't you end with a little bit about Kay Stocklosa for me?
And you can watch the clock.
No, that's okay. You had a story about her.
Kay was absolutely one of the most fierce advocates for children with whom I have ever worked. She was always on top of an issue, always cared deeply about children, always cared deeply about the staff. And I would say that same thing about many of the school board members with whom I served in Lowell. But Kay always was very polished and represented the school district exceedingly well at all times. And I enjoyed working with many, George O'Hare, George Cooler Harris, Clemmy McDonough. I remember Clemmy McDonough because there was a fire station right up the street. Whenever there was the fire trucks were leaving the station and traveling past the city hall and the school committee meeting room, Clemmy would stop the meeting, open the windows, and pay respects to the fire department members going by, then close the windows, and we'd proceed along with the school committee meeting. And so it was occasionally one of those breaks that was good in terms of if there was any tenseness in the meeting, he calmed the whole meeting down. So lots of great people and lots of wonderful memories of the 16 years I was able to spend in Lowell.
And I think that they paid a great tribute to Kay Stocklosa by having the Stocklosa Knowledge Bowl that we have in the city for children. It's a great thing.
Yep.
She would have loved that for sure.
Well, again,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much. Reminder again, don't forget that June 5th at 7 o'clock
Yes.
in the police community room in Chelmsford to discuss this particular issue, because if it happens in one neighborhood, it can happen in another neighborhood. So we want to make sure that people are aware of this if you have time. If you do not have the time, you can always write letters to the Zoning Board of Appeal expressing your opinion on this particular issue that's facing them. We have a lot of Memorial Day events around the Merrimack Valley, and one is in Chelmsford. There is a parade at 10 o'clock in the center of Chelmsford, and some other activities after that. So if anybody's interested in that, you can always look online. There's everything that's on the different town websites as far as those events go. So again, thank you very much especially for getting up extra special early, but I'm certainly sure that you do, and you're probably on your way to New Hampshire after this.
That's correct.
Yeah, and be careful and watch for all the tough weather that we're going to have today. So, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Bob, and we wish
Tomorrow City
Sam
Life,
well.
we got Cliff Grieger and Eileen Dale Rossi. That's tomorrow City Life. We're out of time. Bill, you did a good job. Good luck on June 5th.
Thanks.
Thank
you
you for
very
your
much.
excellence. God bless.